Alrighty.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out and being a part of the Ridgeville Park District's first candidates forum in over 80 years. And I'm honored to serve as your moderator. My name is Oliver A. Ruff. I'm a retired educator. I spend a great deal of time being involved in civic and community activities. I would like to share a disclaimer. Although I am connected with a number of organizations, I in no way am representing any of these organizations this evening. I am simply here as a citizen who agreed to assist in this process. My participation is totally independent of any involvement in any other organizations. I would like to recognize any city officials or community representatives that we have here present this evening. I know we have one. Would you please stand and provide your name and position? Yes. Any public officials or city officials who are here, candidates?
I'm actually running for Oakland Community College Board of Trustees, so I'm not an official yet, but I sure hope to be.
All right.
Thank you.
Did you give your name, Wendy?
Yes, Wendy Yano.
Wendy Yano. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fellowship. I'm sorry, Fellowship. Thank you, Reba Fellowship Church, for hosting this forum this evening. Mr. David Stutz, I don't know if he's going to be here, but he had agreed to handle the questions from the audience, but we'll work around that at the end in the event that he's not present. We ask that you keep your questions focused on the issues and no personal overtones. Just a little information about Ridgeville. Ridgeville Park District is a park district and public agency in South Evanston. It is named after a historical settlement around present-day Ridge Avenue. Ridgeville is dedicated to enriching the lives of its residents and neighbors through a variety of services. Ridgeville is a separate governmental agency based exclusively in South Evanston. In 1939, residents voted to set aside a portion of their property taxes for a separate local district that would meet the needs of accessible green space and cultural opportunities. Because we're a public agency, Ridgeville events are always free. The classes and camps are always affordable, with special subsidies for Ridgeville Park District residents. Ridgeville Park District resident boundaries are from Greenleaf to Howard and the Sanitation Canal to the Metro tracks. Some logistics for this evening. The restrooms are in the back, so if anyone has to go to the restroom, you just go back in the area here. Timekeeper will be Mary Gehring. She will provide a red sheet, so if you're talking too long, she will come up and put the sheet personally in your face so that you can see it. I ask for your cooperation in being compliant. So we're going to have 3 minutes for your introduction and 3 minutes for the summary. 2 minutes for the questions that will be answered, so you'll have 2 minutes per question. There are 4 candidates running for this position, the positions that are available. There are 3 of you here tonight, but there are 4. The persons are Mr. Rob Beatty, Mr. Dan Coyne, Ms. Mary Gaines, and Mr. Matt Mitchell. It's not necessary for you to put your hands up. When you get an opportunity to speak, restate your name so that everybody is aware of who you are, if you will, please. I'd like you to please introduce yourself by name, state your reason for wanting to serve the Ridgeville Park District Board of Commissioners. It would be helpful for the community members to hear about your professional life, as well as to learn a little bit about why Ridgeville caught your interest and willingness to perform a service for this board. So would we start with Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you. Does this sound all right? Great, thank you. I also, Mr. Ruff, wanted to correct the name of the 4th candidate is Ms. Martha Gaines.
What did I say?
Mary.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Make that clear.
Thank you.
My name is Matthew Mitchell, and I'm running for Ridgeville Park District Commissioner. I am an attorney. I live in Ridgeville. with my wife and 2 young sons. They are 3 and 5. So we are going to be starting kindergarten at Oakton this year, this upcoming school year. We're excited about that. We mean to be involved in the community and mean to be settled in the community for many years to come. That is my draw to Ridgeville. I've gotten a lot out of organized sports and outdoor play in my life. I feel like a strong park district is a real benefit to the community. So I feel like it's a way that I can serve, and I would love to have that opportunity. I'm an attorney. I specialize in municipal law, which relates a lot to park district issues. I have a background in criminal justice, criminal defense, and as well as mediation. I really like the idea of alternative dispute resolution as opposed to litigation, and try to incorporate that in my practice and in my life. I want to address the elephant in the room. Dan and Rob gave an interview last week that I thought used some language that was irresponsible. Jim Crow type language, implying that, specifically stating that there was active Jim Crow agendas going on in Ridgeville. I don't think that that's true. I think it's a mischaracterization. I think it does a disservice to the park district and the folks who work there and currently serve on the board and participate in the activities. So I like Dan and Rob. I appreciate you as people. They are actively supporting my campaign, and I appreciate that. The other board members, Pat McCourt and Debbie Braun, are continuing to serve on the board. They're also actively supporting my campaign, and I appreciate them. I do not believe that they are racist. Martha Gaines is also running for the board. I don't believe that she's racist. I think the Jim Crow type language takes away from a constructive conversation about institutional racism and access and equity to power. So I don't mean to start out on a sour note, but I also want to be clear about where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beatty?
Yes, very well done. Matt, thanks for bringing that up. I'd first like to apologize for my part in behavior on Sunday. It was nothing short of divisive and not a way to go about togetherness. So I just want to apologize to those that were offended, not only the community, but the individuals, my park board members, staff, or anybody that I may have offended. And I truly mean that. I think if, I've always been taught, by my mom, who's no longer here, to do things that will make the family proud. That did not make the family proud on Sunday, so I apologize. I apologize for putting you in that situation as well, Matt. And I can learn, we can all learn to go forward from there. With that said, I'm Rob Beatty. I've been on the Ridgeville Park District Board for 6 years. One of the reasons that I came to the board was to be a person that bridged the gap. I think that one of my strengths or gifts, if you will, is a person that can bring some hope cross-culturally, bring conversations together with different people and different mindsets and competing visions. When I was started on the board, I didn't know a whole lot about Ridgeville. All I knew was sports and Reba Park and relationships. my ability to have interpersonal relationships with people, that's a strength of mine. And I went into the board along with Dan, and we were kind of commissioned by Reba, some folks at Reba, not the pastor. Didn't say go over there and do this, or Charlotte, or anybody like that. They just said, I think you should be involved, and I think you're the right people. And we had a stomach for it, and I've learned a tremendous amount from my associates and my counterparts, namely Pat McCord, who was the chair for most of the time that I was there. So I do want to say that I am running again because I want some kid who looks like me, all right, to have some hope. And for him to know that, or her to know that it is okay to participate. And it is okay, you don't have to be the smartest. It is okay to participate and be a part of this district.
Thank you. Dan Coyne, and running for a second term. And Matt, this is exactly why I support you. I think we need you on the board. Your legal, framework in mind is great, and your experience with the municipality is solid. And as you know, we've had a polarized board for the last 6 years, and I think having someone with your mediation skills and ability to bring language that builds a bridge between those, I think is spot on. So, thank you. And I also apologize. There was no intention to call anyone a racist or claim that anyone is, and I don't think anyone is at Ridgeville. I do think that originally why I got involved was I felt like there was institutional racism going on, and that's very different than racism. And what I mean by that is I felt like there were some policy and procedures that kept people of color out of our parks, and that there were very clear use of our police force to go after our kids of color in the parks. And that is dear to my heart. I just don't accept that, and that's why I got involved. But certainly the people, individuals involved, I don't think at all, and I've never claimed that any of them are racist, so I just want to make that clear. I also want to say that I think it's an opportunity for all of us at Ridgeville community, all the stakeholders, to embrace some of the anti-racist training that's available in our community, and also some of the beyond diversity training that's available. Both Rob and I had tried to bring that in a few years ago, and we weren't able to, but perhaps in this next 6 years, that could be one of our first tasks, along with strategic planning, but with a sort of a equity lens as we go forward. So anyway, Matt, thank you for bringing that up. Professionally, I'm a biology person that studied in undergrad and then got my master's degree after a year of seminary at North Park. And my master's degree is in social work from the University of Chicago, and loved it. And I've been working for the last 25 years as a school social worker, a mental health therapist in the community, both in the North Shore for about 7 years and about 13 years in Chicago. And now I'm very blessed. I'm able to work here in Evanston, both at Lincoln Elementary and Washington School as a school social worker, teaching peacemaking, using social skills for our young ones, trying to help them get prepared to make our world a better place. And I may have seen that yellow warning sign. Is that right? Boy, it goes fast. So in short, what I would like to do is, for this next second term, is be able to bridge the divide that we have on our board and use some of the skills that you have and bring forth to make us a 21st century park district.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next area, please list your leadership roles, if applicable, the board services that you experience. Please consider sharing a brief takeaway that you've learned from your leadership roles. Let's start with Mr. Beatty this time.
So my first role on the board was with the Reba Place Development Corporation. So, and I'll just back up a little bit because I didn't really tell you what I do for a living. I was in housing for about 7 years during the time I was here at Reba, and I served as property manager, and kind of moved up the chain a little bit. I worked for a for-profit Affordable Housing Development Corporation, Peter Holston, who does quite a bit with privatization of public housing in Chicago, and he's located on the north side of Chicago, but he specialized in affordable housing and kind of mixed income and doing really special projects. So in the last about 14 years, I've been in medical devices. So I was an OR rep and worked with neurosurgeons and orthopedic spine surgeons, and I currently am a sales manager at a device company that sells hearing aids. So if anybody wants to know anything about ears and hearing aids, that's another area of expertise that I have now. And the question was again.
The question was again, listen in your leadership roles as you've done. Consider sharing any takeaways that you've learned from those leadership roles.
Okay, so Reba Place Development Corporation definitely cut my teeth there and spent about 3 years on the board just learning how to find projects to actually, add to our housing stock. That was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. The second board opportunity that I had, I was a trustee here at Reba, and I don't think you have enough time to go into anything that I went through in church, but there's nothing like church hurt when you get hurt at church, and that's all around, Protestant, Catholic, anywhere, any form of faith, I learned a tremendous amount about people and just humility during that time.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen? Thank you.
Thank you. Before moving here, 28 years ago, Emily, I think, in 92, I was the executive director and founder of a non-for-profit that was an alternative to prison for felons and had started 2 halfway houses, one for women and one for men. And to this day, I'm proud to say that my baby is still existing, and we've saved the taxpayers a lot of money, and we've been able to keep a lot of offenders in the community instead of being in prison, and we're helping them rehabilitate. Also, during that time, I was on the international board of halfway houses, which kind of helped propagate the halfway house movement as alternatives to prisons, and very proud of that board service. Back in the day when we first moved here, I was on the board with Reba Day Nursery, kitty corner to here, and helping them move from sort of a ma and pa shop to really a first grade 21st century daycare now and preschool. And we now are able to serve, I think we have 60 kids there, and many are from families that are single families and people of color. I'm very proud of that as well. I'm currently a board member with a HUD Housing in Tinley Park, Brementown Manor. Very proud of that organization. What we do is we provide affordable housing for seniors, about 110 units there. And for the last 28 years, we've been able to provide seniors without much resources a very beautiful place to live, and it's developed a community for them. I'm currently a board member on a non-for-profit called Chicago Voyagers. And what we're trying to do is, and what we have been doing, is using outdoor therapeutic services to keep at-risk teens on the race. And I think that's very, very good investment. For a very little bit of money, we can actually help kids instead of shooting each other, they can go canoeing. And also, I've spent the last 6 years as a voluntary board member with Ridgeville Park District, and I'm very proud of that service. Very fiscally responsible, and brought in some new programming, and I also think we were able to get rid of some of those policies that I was concerned with before.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
I want to start by talking about leadership that I learned at a young age, and then get to my professional leadership and experience. I alluded before to the importance of organized sports in my life, especially as a young person. Organized sports kept me focused and driven, allowed me to grow physically, mentally, and I think most importantly, relationally with my teammates and coaches. I, in my life, have been the best player on sports teams, and I've been a role player on sports teams. I've been the captain of a number of sports teams, and I've been a bench warmer on a number of sports teams. I've been on winning teams and losing teams, but I've learned a lot from working with other people towards a common goal. I'm not going to list my athletic achievements. 1993 state champs football. Yeah, the ring got stolen in a break-in. But professionally, I, for the past 2 years, have been involved in City of Evanston Committee, a CPCAC, Citizens Police Complaint Assessment Committee. I was the chair of that committee of 9 individuals, all Evanston residents, and we were tasked with evaluating and critiquing the way complaints against police officers are made in the city of Evanston. We did a lot of outreach to the community and worked closely with the police department, police leadership. We sat down with individual officers. We sat down with the unions, the Fraternal Order of Police, patrolmen and sergeants, and tried to come to a consensus of our 9-person committee about ways that we could improve the structural complaint system in Evanston. And I believe that we did that. My time's up. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. Excuse me. Our community is actively embracing anti-racism with an equitable lens throughout our public institutions and governing structures. Can you briefly identify areas of the Park District, the Ridgeville Park District, that has certain policies and procedures that might be applicable in that area? And can you include any board or executive levels that you might feel that would benefit from any equitable training and revisions that you feel that are important? Mr. Cohen, would you please start?
Yes, thank you. That's the whole equity question, I think, is important, and I'm very proud to say that there's a number of our private and public institutions in town that are fully engaged in this discussion, and I think it's mandatory for us if we want to be a 21st century community that embraces everybody. I do want to say, before I get into that, is that one outcome or one takeaway from my board service in these different organizations is that when storms hit, and they do with every organization for fiscal reasons or community reasons or staff reasons, storms hit. And I think as a board member, it's important for us to steer that ship during those storms. Keep us focused on the mission. Try to, relationally problem solve with all the stakeholders and try to bring back what we need for the organization after the storm. Both Rob Beatty and I said earlier have been advocating for Ridgeville Park District to go through a systemic sort of equity training through some of the YWCA folks that are here. District 65 has a wonderful Beyond Diversity training. And I'd love to see that applied to everyone at Ridgeville. So not just the board members, but our staff and volunteers, anybody that's working with our kids in our community. And specifically, some of the policy and procedures I'd like us to tackle is I'd like us to basically take a strong look at bringing in Spanish signage. We have a very strong Hispanic, wonderful Latino, Latinx, Latina community, and I'd like us to really include our Latinos if we can. I also would like to end our nepotism policy. I think it is a problem when Caucasian directors and board members hire their own family members that are white, and it does stop some of our local people of color from feeling like they're part of the family, that they can join our organization. I just think in a government organization there should be zero nepotism. I also believe that very strongly that any health benefit should go to all the employees, not just the executive director. And for our full-time employees, I think everyone should get the same family leave option. And I just got the red sign, so I'll end. But there's a lot of work that we can do, and all of us, I own it too, on this equity question.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, would you please start?
Thank you. I also support equity training. I, as a member of the Evanston community, am generally impressed with the level of discourse regarding race and racism, and that's just the starting point. believe that we need to have that conversation about institutional racism in America, in Evanston, in the Ridgeville Park District. I believe the question was equity and education.
Right, and regarding training and any revisions that you might feel that would affect the policies and
Sure.
procedures.
So one thing I would like to do is partner with different members of the community. I see the Park District as one pillar of the civic community, and that we can partner with other strong pillars and organizations. One being District 65, District 202. Ridgeville is 2 blocks from St. Francis Hospital. I know that there's grant funding available for health and wellness programs. I would love to see that come in to all of the Ridgeville community. Specifically, Brummel Park and Elks Park, I'd like to see more of an outreach when we're talking about equity. I would like to see more programming on the south end of Ridgeville. I like Dan's idea of Spanish signage, Spanish programming, ESL programming. I think Ridgeville is a small park district, and one of the conversations that I've had running for Ridgeville Commissioner is, should we even have a Ridgeville? Should it just be taken over by the city of Evanston? And I don't think so. I think the benefits of Ridgeville are local control and local agility, that we can address local problems quicker and better than a bigger organization. We just need to be willing to do that.
Thank you.
All right, guys, you didn't leave us
Mr. Lady.
with much. It's interesting being, an African American on the board, and also in 2019, still being a pioneer. I've got problems with that. That we're not looking through an equity lens, or at least just it's unconscious. A lot of stuff that happens, it's like, I don't think anybody's over there going, I don't want you in the park. I just think they're going about their business and they're taking care of things. So I think it starts with the subconscious, and you have to make sure that you are really taking a look at everything. If you look at one of our wards, we've got the 8th, the 9th, and portions of the 4th and the 2nd ward. But the 8th ward in particular has, I think it's somewhere around, I want to say 49 or 50% of Black and Latino. So to me, there's enough there. And if we probably did the other numbers and maybe a little bit of the 9th and some of the 2nd, we could probably find more. And I'm not saying they're the only ones there, but there's a vulnerability there that I think we need to really take a look at. And again, I'll share a quick story about kids down on Case and Callum at Elks Park. I would like to see us do more. We've got such a big space there, and there's so much more we can do with that, and be creative with that space, and bring more kids out, because most of those kids on the south end can't get to Robert Crown. So I want to create a bridge for them to be a part of Ridgeville.
Thank you. Evanston seems to enjoy an abundance of deep resources and services to her citizens and visitors. But our college readiness gap between students of color and whites continue to baffle all stakeholders. Can you envision the Ridgeville Park District programming and or services that has a potential to lessen the educational gap? And you briefly have spoken to that. Would you like to elaborate as to what programming and services may be important in trying to lessen that educational gap? We'll start this time, I think we went with Mr. Mitchell. Thank you.
Going in order.
Thank you. I think we should partner with anybody and everybody. I don't think that the primary goal of the park district is education, but it does overlap with the civic responsibilities of a park district. So where a park district can help bridge a gap and offer opportunities. I don't want to steal the thunder of Mr. Beatty and Mr. Coyne, but I know on their tenure, the park district has partnered with District 65 and Shoot to provide an after-school program at the Kingman East Field House. And it's a great program. It's a joint program between the City of Evanston, as far as I know, the City of Evanston and Ridgeville. More of that. I think we should be open to any and all partnerships. And getting back, I think Rob made a good point to the equity aspect of vulnerable populations. I learned a long time ago that fair doesn't necessarily mean equal. Fair means everybody getting what they need. And so as the park district, we can provide for unmet needs of certain members of the population, we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beatty?
All right. This is exciting. We're talking about park districts and recreation, and now we're talking about education. I think they're synonymous. I think kids go right out of school to the court. I've met so many kids at Reba Park, and I've seen them growing up. I know a teacher now who was a first generation or Jamaican kid, and now Preston DeCosta is actually teaching science at Martin Luther King Lab School. So I mean, that's incredible. I had a chance to help that. He didn't have a dad his entire life. I think that we are an extension of that. I think that Ridgeville should be partnering with everyone, like Matt said. Not only that, but the churches. I mean, it's incredible if the resources from Reba in Ridgeville are on the same page in the same neighborhood, what that might look like. That could be pretty incredible. I think that the elected officials, the aldermen from the 8th Ward, from the 9th Ward, from the 2nd and 4th, should be involved in Ridgeville and care about everything Ridgeville and go, how can we help you? And let's create some opportunities. I want to bring a skate spot. We just had an idea, a skate spot to one of our parks. It's 30 by 70 little slab. I saw it in Lincolnwood. I'd love to bring something like that. Now, my kids don't skateboard anymore. They passed that age, but maybe Matt kids might want to skateboard in a couple years. But that's what I say.
Thank you. Mr. Coyne?
As a 25-year educator, I firmly believe in building relationships with families and students. A person doesn't just learn in a classroom. We learn even when we're asleep. We learn around the table with their family. We learn in the parks. And one reason I got involved here at Ridgeville was because it broke my heart as a social worker and an educator to see our parks empty. It broke my heart to see Ridgeville hiring guards from the high school to be at the park in the summer. I don't believe we need guards in the parks. I think we need youth outreach. I think we need to have parties and bring the families and the children out during the summer and the evenings after school. That is the best community building, in my opinion, that we could do. Now, specifically, our shoot after school has about 30 students. Many of them are new refugees. I want 300 students getting services. Why just shoot? Nichols has the same need. Okay? King Arts, same need. Now, I have talked with many folks that run some of the programs in nonprofits in this town, AYSU, EBSA, and others. They're wonderful. How many people of color are involved in those sports? How many people without money are involved in those expensive sports? What we need is to use our park district, that's locally here, to find out what kids' needs are not being met and embrace them and get them involved with some of these fun activities so that when they are in the classroom, they feel good about themselves and they feel welcomed, that our community wants them to grow. That's how you lessen the gap. It takes relationships.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening and for caring enough to be a part of this community and to run for public office, particularly the candidates. And please use this time to share with us your vision of the Ridgeville Park District and or in your closing remarks of what you'd like to consider. So you have an hour and a half to do that for each of these. We'd like you to express your thoughts and ponder any other considerations for the next 3 minutes. I think we start with Mr. Beatty. Who went last? Okay, Mr. Beatty, you and Mr. Cohen. Go on.
Yeah, I could talk for hours. I have spent hundreds of hours on this topic, and I'll volunteer for another 6 years to do the same. And I do want to say that we will have some questions from the audience right after we're done. And Daniel Stutz, if you don't mind getting over, there's a mic behind the tree you can pull out, and people can just go up to Mr. Stutz and ask your question. We'd be happy to answer those. Really, do we want to be a 1950s community in our parks? Or do we want to be 21st century best practices? I think, and I advocate for 21st century. Instead of closing all the full courts, we should have more full court basketball. I want the kids in the park. I want to know who they are, and I want to know they're doing constructive things that are legal and fun. I do think that nepotism with 20% of the budget going to the same folks on the board and the executive director is wrong. And I think we need to hire more people from our community and build up leaders from our community and teach them how to engage our community so that they can go to their next stage in adulthood. I'd like to hire here at Ridgeville. I also mentioned earlier, we don't need guards in the parks. We can use our relational skills and our resources here in our community to engage our children and our families outdoors doing fun activities, period. I also believe that it's important to broadcast what we do at Ridgeville. Before Rob and I came on, the old board had nothing as far as recording or letting the community know what we were doing other than a written, minutes. Now we Facebook Live, and that's an easy no-brainer. It's free, and you can get 1,000 people watching a boring meeting if they want for 2 hours. I mentioned earlier the equity in our health benefits. That's very important, dear to me. We have 2 Latino full-time employees. They're fantastic. They have children, they have families, but they don't have insurance. But our executive director has full family insurance. I think we should be equitable in how we provide our benefits to our employees. And I believe that very strongly. I also believe in 21st century management and evaluation of our executive directors. Having an informal, on a piece of paper type of annual evaluation is the 1950s. 21st century is time our executive director's annual review with our organization's mission. And those two need to be tied together. And that's how you grow a park district. Right now we're $700,000, I think, a year. And the taxpayers are paying about $6 a month to help us do that. I do think if we were to become a 21st century park district, we could double that budget with private funders and other organizations that would want to partner with us, which means more services and more outreach to the community. And lastly, I'll close with this. Why do we call Evanston Police Department on families that are barbecuing in our parks? That's wrong. I want families barbecuing in all of our parks. I want more picnic tables. I would love to come to a barbecue any day of the week if they invite me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty.
Always hard to follow Dan. All right. My vision for Ridgeville in my next term is that, number one, I think I've learned a lot. Because the first 2 years I just sat and I just listened. because I wanted to learn how to be a good board member. What I'd like to see is a situation, we only have 5 board members, a situation where people are getting mentored. Okay? You're invited to the board because not only do you have something to bring to the board, but there's something to learn, and we can learn from each other. So I think this is more about the future. This is about the future of Ridgeville Park District and how are we going to do Ridgeville Park District in the future. It is about the youth. It's about my son. It's about Matt's kids. It's about Dan and Emily's kids and your kids who are going to take this over. What we don't do a good job of in all of Evanston, look all around Evanston, it's leadership. People stay in places too long, and we just put up with it. It's about the future. My church here, for example, Reba, went through some changes. Okay, there was a new pastor. Okay, Charlotte wasn't always the pastor, but she has spent the last 10 plus years pastoring, and you know, that's a very difficult task. So what am I talking about in respect to Ridgeville? Let's prepare for the future. Let's start preparing young people. I'd like to see Preston DaCosta from this neighborhood join the board someday. I'd like to see some Latino, male or female, join the board. You don't not have to be some incredible person to be a part of any of these boards. It is the regular people who fill the churches, who do all the work, who do the connections for the homeless work. It is regular folks like you and me who do this. So let's build for the future for Ridgeville by looking at our future and focusing on our youth. Maybe an advisory board from the neighborhood. Let's get some kids involved. I don't want to do more than 13 years. I just want to do 2 6-year terms, move my butt on, and go play some basketball in my old age. But it's about the future, and that's what I want to leave you with, and that's from my heart.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. My vision for Ridgeville and vision of the board are a bit separate. For the board, I've been to a lot of board meetings, and the board is very polarized right now, and I think it will continue to be so going forward. I would like to be a part of that conversation and help guide that conversation in a productive direction. How I propose to do that is strict formalism. I think the board should be super professional and should model civic behavior and should be transparent to the community. You know, we were talking before about equity, institutional racism. All of those things should be part of the conversation, not behind closed doors, not one-on-one, but out in the open. I think everything should be straightforward. This is what the board does is spends public dollars. It's a volunteer position that is in charge of a $700,000 budget. Vice President Biden once said, "Don't tell me what your priorities are, show me your budget." That's the primary mover of the Ridgeville Park District is the allocation of the budget. I really like Dan's idea of creating a bigger pie by getting grant funding, perhaps outside funding. And in doing so, I think from my vision of the park district is that it should be agile. We should be able to experiment with programming. We should be able to try out a program. Well, you know, we have the space. I think the space we have in Ridgeville should be used by the people. I think one of the jobs of the board is balancing the needs and interests of the community. I represent a nature-based play preschool right now who's in a heated dispute with some neighbors in the Chicago Park District. And what everybody is trying to, trying to say this politely, the dispute is over land use. Who gets to use the land and how? And what I think the correct answer is everybody gets to use the land and not to the exclusion of others. That's my vision of the Park District. It should be a community resource that is open and available to all members of the community and should be able to meet those needs of different members. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. You've heard, excuse me, from my candidates, and they've answered their questions very, very thoroughly. I'd like to offer an opportunity for those of you who are in the audience, if you have any uniquely difficult questions for them, we want them to be challenged. So if you have any questions, please feel free to share those. Mr. Daniel Stutz will bring the mic to you or provide it for you.
So shoot the first question.
I don't know how long the cord is, you might have to come.
How much time do they each have to answer questions?
Oh, yeah.
2 minutes.
2 minute answer, sir, is that?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
So as best you can, describe what you think, not in formal language, but just like, as you understand it, the essential mandate of the board or of the Park District. And then name the 2 out of the many different programming areas, coming, out of, the Ridgeville Park District. Name the 2 that you, out of all of them, you think best work to meet that mandate.
Is this for each person or just for any one person? All of them.
Yeah, for each of them.
There were a few points in your question, I'm just trying to get clear.
Essential mandate,
Okay.
and of like the 75 different program areas, which 2 do you think best, or which 2 would you preserve? If you had to just keep 2,
Okay.
you think these 2 areas, that's kind of an arbitrary number, but which program areas do you think best work to serve the mandate of the Park District? And you might change your answers like in a week.
Yeah, so I've got one.
The mandate and the program area.
Sure. I've got my 2. I'm not sure you're right. If I thought about it longer, they might change. So I think the mandate is to serve the diverse needs of the community. And that is young people, old people, people who use the parks for quiet leisure, people who use the parks for exciting sports. I think of all the diverse needs of the community, it's hard to have a strict mandate. So if I was to come up with 2 programs that benefit the needs of everybody, one thing that I love is the concerts in the park at Ridgeville. They are accessible to everybody. They're free. It's a nice use of the space. It's a nice community gathering. It's low key. I think it represents the community well. That, and then the farmers market is oftentimes goes on at the same time. I think it benefits the mission of the Park District of healthy, happy people. Healthy, happy people of all ages. So those are my 2.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, The mandate, if I understand the question right, is really what is our park about? And I do believe it is to serve our community. And since 1939, when we first started, we're much more diverse. It was white and it was Catholic. And now, fortunately, we're a very diverse community, and I think that's our strength. And I think the board should reflect that, and I think our programming should reflect that, and how we reach out to our diverse community. And as a social worker trained, I do believe in surveying, a deep survey of needs from our community. And I don't mean just asking the owners of homes around each park. I mean going from the tracks all the way over to the canal, from Greenleaf down to Howard, and actually survey every household and every business that's in our district that's paying their taxes. What do we think our needs are? What do I think as an educator, as a social worker? I think we need to serve the poorest people and the richest people in our community, and we've got it both. But especially those that are marginalized, especially those, our new immigrants that have come in, that are trying to navigate this new country and this new culture. We need to reach out to them and make sure they are welcome in our parks. Our Latinx community needs to know, not only do we want them using our parks, we want them to give us ideas of what we could do better. We want them to run our parks. I mean, there's so much that we could do through diversification and using the equity lens to better serve our community. But I think it starts with making sure that every voice comes to the table so that we better understand what those needs really are.
I'm going to take a little different, because I think one of our needs is to make sure that through the budget we maintain the parks. And I think it's really hard to, over the years, at least the 6 years that I've been here, is to, just set aside money for the upkeep of parks. I think when people walk to a park, thankfully, we're able to take care of Rome. I mean, what a good feeling that was for the folks who live around that park. Because you got a lot of folks who are in smaller dwellings, apartments and condos, and then you've got a nice, a mix, a little bit of everything over there. But what tends to happen is when you've got somewhere that's very densely populated, you get a lot of traffic. You get a lot of traffic in those areas, and we have to maintain our parks. We have to find a way. We've done very well with being fiscally responsible in the sense that I don't think we spend enough money. I think there's we have to be very cautious in going, okay, let's just do this so we can make budget and we're good. And we don't really like to stick our necks out. But I really think that we need to concentrate on maintaining our parks, because when people go to our 14.1 acres and our 7 playgrounds, I have an expectation, and I think they have an expectation that it's going to stay that way. And the second piece of that for me is kind of conservation. I think we need to be really responsible to just our footprint, from how much water we use, to, I think we should have water in all parks too, by the way. We haven't done that very well, and that's for another day, but those would be my two. Thanks.
Thank you.
We have another question.
It's really pushing that cord there.
I'm going to address this to Mr. Mitchell, maybe Rob and Jan, but there still seems to be a large disparity of services for people of color, and I think too that people on the board, who don't even live here, make decisions for our community, that needs to be reevaluated. Because how can you live in Wilmette and make a decision for what goes on here in South Evanston that's related to where I live. So I would like for you, Mr. Mitchell, first to speak on how you would bridge that gap in services for people of color.
Thank you. So first, I just want to clarify, to be on the Ridgeville Board of Commissioners, you need to live within Ridgeville. So all of the 5 members that are currently on the board, and it's a pre-qualification for running. The executive director, I think is who you were referring to, does not live in Ridgeville. So I don't think that's illegal. I know it's not. There's not a residency requirement. The question is, should there be? It's a valid question. I think it's worth talking about publicly. In terms of programming for people of color, and what I think I heard was people on the South End.
I live on the South End, and there's just not enough services for people of, especially the kids in this. I hate the summer to come because they're just running the streets, and there's like either due to low income and not enough money to pay for programs, they have nothing to do, and so they tend to get in trouble.
And that's where I feel like the Park District could and should be responsive to the needs of the community, and could and should offer organized play in the parks. You know, I think there's a lot of low-cost fixes to kids running around unorganized. You know, and it's also a job opportunity for other young folks. I would love to see more programming like that, and I would love to see more delegation of power to folks in the community.
So how would you bridge that gap? What would you do? How would you make that happen? You said that the board was polarized. I'm not sure what the polarization is about, but what would you do to bring that to the board to say, look, this really does need to happen. We need to bridge that disparity there.
Sure. So what I would do is address and propose specific programming, and propose a way to fund it. I think outreach to members of the community, I think Dan was alluding to this earlier, about asking people, everybody in the community, what they want from the Park District. What I'm hearing from you is that there's a need for organized play, organized
activities,
for young
educational
folks.
programs.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've been at Park District meetings where it's been proposed that there should be more organized basketball leagues. And I think there's a hesitancy to start new programs. I am not hesitant whatsoever to start new programs. And some of them are going to work, some of them aren't. I'm fine with that. So what am I going to do? I'm happy to listen, number one, to what people want, and number two, make specific proposals to put that into action.
Just to respond to that, I think the onus is on me and on us who are whoever gets on the board. It wasn't for lack of trying with some programming. I know that I'm a big basketball guy, and I'm like, it's not hard to get a former player out there and get a 3-on-3 going. I ran 8 years in a row out at Reba Park before the rim was taken down. We had full court, and we used to just play half court on both sides so we could get more people playing. But I know I'd love to. I've got some ideas for the South End, and I think with someone like Matt on board as well as Dan, we can implement some of those things. I'm very hands-on when it comes to creating program and creating ideas of the way that kids can play. I love to see it, and I think Elks Park is underutilized. I mean, you can go there and it's a desert. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity there, as well as Brummel. You know, Brummel's a bright spot for us because there's a lot of activity there, but there's also a lot of very caring parents. There's one of them out in the audience there, Michelle Hayes, who spends quite a bit of time there and mentoring at the park. But, you know, there's plenty of opportunities. And I think that you're right, Ms. Ellie, that we should make this a priority.
Ms. Ellie, I believe you were asking this question, and it's dear to my heart. I think one of the reasons we're polarized is because we have different philosophies of how to implement as board members policy and procedure and how to oversee our top management administrator. That's our job. And I think we've abdicated too much to that person. And I think we've not diversified our board enough in order to do a better job. Part of that is our responsibility as voters. To have 10% of our registered voters who vote for school districts, Oakton Community College, and park districts, it's a shame. Shame on us. Vote. We have, I believe, close to 6,000, some 300 registered voters, or even more than that. There's 6,000 residences, but about 11,000 registered voters that could vote on April 2nd. If we only have 600 votes, what does that mean, Ms. Ellie? That hurts. That hurts me. I would like to have 100% vote, and whatever we end up voting, I want to support. But if only 5% of our voters vote, what are we saying about our kids and those needs that you mentioned? Now, I have tried to implement, and it takes 3 votes in a 5-board member to get anything passed. Rob and I have tried to implement 21st century policy and procedures. That's best practices that the national park districts want us to do. One of those is this residency question you're talking about. Not that we would mandate residency, but we would have a point system, call it 5 points for an applicant. One of those points, though, is the person, he or she, lives in the district. That's a point. If you don't get that point, because we want local people involved. That's how you can, I think, better meet the needs of what you're talking about, and get rid of nepotism. When I started, we had 20% of the budget going to executive director and board members' families. We should not hire those. Our family members should not be hired in a public district. We should be hiring people in our community.
Thank you.
I think Michelle had a question.
So I have a just simple, quick question. Rob, you talked about the budget and how it's allocated. One of the questions I have is, Ridgeville House is not accessible, sort of, period. I just want your response to that statement, because I know it's been a problem for me. So I can imagine it's a problem globally.
So are you referring to 908 Seward?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you say accessible, would you be meaning that as far as the community using it, or
I'm talking at this point physically accessible. You know, that it is not wheelchair accessible.
Yes.
It's not ADA compliant, and it's not a particularly physically usable building.
Yes.
Even considering those issues.
And a bigger vision, again, we're talking about some competing visions. One of the ideas I had, actually 25, maybe 30 years ago, the city had a plan to actually make Elks Park a center. They wanted to make a community center there. So some folks from even Reba were involved in that way back. And I wasn't even around, because I've been here for 20 years in Evanston, and I would love to get something built. I think that's the future, and that is the vision that we need to take hold of, and that's actually what can we do with Ridgeville to actually take it to the 21st century. And I think it's in tearing that down and actually building something. I mean, Crown did it. Maybe they're in a little debt right now, but there's a little a problem with that. But, you know, I think we have to think about our infrastructure, because all we're doing is throwing money at paving. we're just, you know, doing slight repairs, and that's why we need to have a strategic, meeting where we do a 5-year plan. We actually did one of those several months ago, where we actually we're trying to get to that place where this is not just a mom and pop shop. We can do so much more here, and I think we can build, but we've got to have visions that go together, and not just we're going to stay like this. And that's what I'm hoping for. Does that make sense?
Thank you for your accessibility question. That's dear to my heart. I'm a social worker, public education, and one of the favorite schools where I've ever worked in my whole career is just down the street at Park. I could work there for free. Don't tell Paul Gorin, but I would work there for free till I die. It's the most beautiful, developmentally disabled, handicapped community I've ever seen in my life. And I would love to see our district, in answer to your question, partner with Park, partner with Reba, partner with St. Nick's, partner with JRC, partner with our different faith groups that have facilities in our district that are accessible, and run the parks out of these facilities. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. You go to where the need is. Can we spend $1 million to build a new 908 sewer? No, we don't have that. But we have facilities that are accessible. People are wanting to partner with our district, and I think all we need to do is let people know and have a board approve this, that we are open. We'll come up with creative, low budget kind of options so that we can be more accessible to more people. Just for instance, one of the programs we have is the Shakespeare in the Park. Beautiful, right? Beautiful. Well, on a rainy day, where can we go? Well, how about this theater? Make it free for the community and bring everybody here, still have the play. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could look at this. And I think by partnering with our current facilities and organizations that actually have a lot of overlap in their missions and what we're trying to do, we probably could meet that need without spending $1 million for a new building.
Hi, thank you.
Your answer, you're already on the board.
So, to build off of Michelle's question and what I've been hearing all around, there are a lot of needs that are unmet. What I'm not hearing is has anybody considered funding an equity assessment of the entire park? And because there are resources that are underutilized in neighborhoods where there are significant needs. There's inaccessibility in its broadest possible way. So lots of good ideas, but what have you thought about, budgeting for an equity assessment to find out what's going on, who needs what, and precisely what to do about it?
Well, again, I think that that's a fair question, and it's something that we've thought about. It's also, Dan alluded to it earlier, that we actually explored bringing in, and we did bring her in, Eileen Heineman with YWCA to actually talk about that and try to put some framework around that. But that's you really gotta stare and look in the mirror. That's a hard thing for a group to do that's already in a position that's, like we said before, very polarized, and and it's a blame game. I couldn't bring that, and Dan was bringing that. Can you imagine, Dan being Dan, going, we need an equity assessment, and how that's going over with the rest of the board? I could have brought it. It wouldn't have been a good thing. I think that's tough work. And even though we're doing it in 65 and 202 and the city of Evanston, that's a huge leap. I mean, I'm the first elected African American in Ridgeville, at least from what I've seen from looking through the history books. There was 2 other people, Martha McDonald, who lives on Reba Street in her 80s, and Judith Tradeway, who's part of 65 and their equity group. So I think we need to take some smaller steps first, and then maybe we can get there.
Can I just answer briefly? I think it's a great idea, and I think it also falls into what Dan was alluding to of best practices. There needs to be some new blood and some new ideas about how the park district can serve the community better. I'd like to be a part of that.
I'll be brief. I know it's getting, just to say that Saturday I was at a funeral. My friend's father passed, and we were at Ridgeville, where a lot of the buildings are named after the family. Harrison Staines, who made his money through bank mergers. But he was a brilliant, compassionate person who gave away hundreds of millions, and the family continues to give away hundreds of millions to do equity work in our world, in our community. I think if our board and our little Ridgeville can find consensus and a common vision, I think it will attract people like Harrison who want to invest in communities like ours. Why not, in the next 6 years, have a 4-season sports facility right here? And one of the buildings that's currently here, we don't have to build a new Crown Center. But it's not just ice skating, it's a place for all the kids, free, to come off the streets and work out and be an outreach indoors. I don't know, things like that. It's possible, and there are people that would invest if we could really give them a good vision.
Just have one more question real quick.
I haven't seen any literature of, put in the hallways of buildings of who's running. Some years ago, when you guys ran, there was a lot of handouts that were placed in hallways about who was running. So why haven't I seen that for you all?
Sorry, I didn't want to. Yeah.
Ridgeville's a lot less known on the election circuit, as you can see. This is the first that we're doing of this. So I think we're building some momentum. Matt's got signs. We've got signs on the way, and we've got things. But yeah, we're getting there, building some momentum, and it's not a big election either. So I don't know if you've not seen a whole lot of signs for a whole lot of people. Some people aren't invested in signs. And it's costly too. So.
If I understand your question, Ms. Ellie, were you talking about the actual canvassing for candidates to hand out to voters?
No. Like a couple of years ago, in my hallway, there was all this information about who was running for the board and the council. And I was, I don't know anything about Mr. Mitchell. I mean, I know about you because I, know you. But that was helpful back in, how many years was that? 6 years maybe? That so I was just curious because I haven't seen any at all.
I'm biased in my answer, but I think that it's genius to keep people uninformed, to keep it as it is. I don't agree with it, but it's genius.
Okay. The next person.
Hi. Normally I would be doing Facebook Live on this, but I can't get any service for some reason.
Facebook's not working. Yeah.
So, you had mentioned earlier the diversity sensitive. I know she had talked about the equity assessment, but I'm still not getting an answer, an understanding, clarity. What exactly was said for why those assessments were not done? Exactly what was said. Don't brush over it. Just tell us exactly what was said. Why the diversity sensitivity wasn't done. Why the equity assessments were not done.
At the moment, when this conversation was going officially at the board meeting, we were still using nepotism where the person taking our minutes, that's the official record, was the wife of the president of the board. And I adamantly thought that was not the right thing. We should have an independent person doing the minutes so that the actual record of our meetings is a bit more trustworthy. That said, I remember very clearly, we don't have a racial problem at Ridgeville. There's no need for it, and I'm not going to allow it to discuss. And when I'm just one voice on a board...
Who said that?
The president of the board, Matt McCord.
Okay.
Public meeting.
It's on tape, so, was that on tape?
Well, it took me 2 years to get Facebook Live in there, but now it's on tape, but I think this was back when we were just doing note-taking.
I was not a part of the board at the time, and so I don't know, but to my knowledge, all of the Park District were audio recorded prior to Facebook Live.
Okay, so the interview that was done on Evanston Live TV, I know you guys are apologizing, well, Rob is apologizing. I feel you shouldn't apologize if what was said was true and you can back it up. And from what I can see in this room, I think there's a lot of people of color feel like they're not a part of Ridgeville. Like decisions are being made, it doesn't matter, they're not here. Because it's not about them. This is evident. And I wish I had my camera to show it. And that's all I got to say.
Don't apologize if it's not true. I mean,
Are there any additional questions?
Any other question? Well, I have one question, but well, as an immigrant myself, I'm wondering, and I work with immigrants and refugees for a nonprofit organization. I'm wondering what your vision is of integrating immigrants in Evanston and maybe promoting citizenship, maybe working with undocumented youth, like promoting DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is a benefit for undocumented youth. It's a deferred deportation. People will not be deported, get a work permit. I'm just wondering whether you have thought about that, for example, doing something in those two areas, using the spaces.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is let's partner. Let's partner and let's have a meeting. I mean, we can't if we're elected again, we can't meet as a big group because of certain rules. But I'd love to sit down with you and talk through how that might look, because using your expertise, plus in the 8th Ward, I know that there's quite a few folks who may fit that description, and I would have to get more educated on it. I know that you have some expertise in that area, but
ETHS also works with
ETHS.
Undocumented youth. They have,
Yes.
Yeah, resources.
I'd love to work with you, and I'll leave the floor for the other guys.
I work at Lincoln in Washington. It has a number of new refugees, new immigrants, families. And I think that there are a number of folks within our school districts that would love to collaborate and work better with Ridgeville on how to serve our kids, especially our immigrant kids. They're trying to navigate this culture. Just one short story. I presented an idea to the PTA at Lincoln last year. I said, a good chunk of your constituents actually live on our side of the tracks, the west side of the metro tracks. And they didn't know that. And I said, yep, from Dempster almost down to Howard, there's a big chunk of folks that actually go to Lincoln, and they're of color, and many are immigrants. So it's cheaper to rent on this side of the tracks. So how about we have a little pizza party on this side of the tracks, Lincoln sponsored, and see if we could attract more people from our immigrant community and people of color to this party. And Charlotte was here and a number of others, and I just want to say, those PTA members were in this room because it was a rainy day where we had it. We had a gaga pit here and 400 kids running around creating chaos, including intergenerational immigrant families on this floor in their broken English saying, thank you. I was afraid to go across the other side of the tracks. I didn't think I was welcome. Of course, Lincoln welcomes everyone, but that, to me, is is a solid question of how we might address what you're talking about, and I'm a social worker. So I think that's where it starts, a basic, safe, relational experience so that all families feel welcome and all families are a voice in this decision.
I'd love to partner with anybody, anytime.
Or maybe nonprofits working with.
Sure, and I'm an attorney and I do immigration work. I think the idea of having legal help for DACA eligible folks or people who are in the DACA program, as a lot of you know, it is vulnerable right now. English as a second language for citizenship tests, study groups for citizenship tests, open celebrations for immigrant families, for refugee families. I think all of those are opportunities that the Park District could do better.
Thank you. Any other question?
We have mentioned polarization several times. Are there any succinct strategies that you have to bridge that polarization that's currently within the board?
Yes, sir. How
Succinctly.
to bridge the polarized board? Well, hire the three of us. In particular, I put a lot of weight on my buddy Matt, but I do think, and I don't discount that, this is really important. Matt's expertise and experience really is in doing just what you said. He works with a lot of clients that are litigating, a lot of folks that are kind of maybe mad at each other, and he helps them to find common ground. And I would love to have his skill set on our board. I would love to have some retreats where we go into executive session and we can strategically plan together and discover our common vision. And we've got common vision. We just have to be civil about it and listen to each other and find out what areas that we could work together. And when we disagree, it's okay. That's okay. I've been married now all these years to my best friend, and we disagree all the time, and she's the person I love more than anybody else in the world. It's okay to disagree. It's just, how do we do that?
Thank you, each one of you. Thank you.
I guess I'll, one of the things that I just want to just recall, when I joined the board, the first and second year, I just wanted to show the board Black excellence. And how I did that was, the only way I know, through sports. I went, hey, there's Reba Knox. He played for the Negro Leagues. So when February came around, I said, this is Black History Month. Has Ridgeville ever celebrated Black History Month? And I brought Ray Boo Boy and told his story and introduced him and gave him a certificate and just congratulated him because, he's a living legend. And I met him right in the neighborhood. He goes to church here. And the second year, I started another tradition where I invited a former NBA player who had played 7 years in the pro, who lived right in our district. So Ray Boo Boy Knox, baseball player, lived in our district, and Rick Marsh, who was one of the top 100 players to ever come out of New York, which is a big deal to me. And I know him, he's a buddy of mine. And I was so excited to bring that what ended up happening was the Park District started to notice Heritage Month for everyone. So we noticed Latino Month, or Hispanic Month, or Hispanic Heritage Month, and then we went on to International Women's Month. It was just on and on. So we created a tradition, and I didn't even realize that till now, but I wanted to bring it up as a tradition that we started, and I helped to start it, and I didn't even realize it, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very interested in structural change, and how I feel I would attempt to change the polarization of the board is to structurally change the the way the board meets, and to formalize it. I think everything should be transparent. I think everybody should follow the same rules. I think discussion should be public, and people should advocate their opinion. You know, I think there should be cohesive arguments for and against certain policies, certain budget decisions, and then the 5 individuals who are voted to make the decisions should publicly make those decisions and stand by it, and that the entire board then should move forward wholeheartedly with the decision made by the democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, before we go on, acknowledge Ms. Michelle Hayes, who's a candidate for the Oakton Community College Board. She came in a little late, so if we could just be aware that she's in. Thank you.
I mean, these guys know how, or well, Matt doesn't know, but the other 2 know how long I've worked with Ridgeville and how important it is to me, and how much I appreciate the asset. My group Back on Their Feet does our Christmas giveaway party at the Ridgeville House every year, which is why I know the accessibility is a problem.
Can you speak up?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to acknowledge that I've worked with Ridgeville for a long time, and I have worked with Dan and Rob, and appreciate being able to work with a small park district that works with you to do small things.
Did you hear that, Mr. Gibbs? She says she worked with Ridgeville Board for some years, and she's been around Ridgeville for a long time, and she just wanted to share that, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'd like to first thank Ms. Mary Gehring and Ms. for timekeeping. Thank you, you did an excellent job. Mr. Daniel Stutz for any questions from the audience. Thank you so much. Special thank you to all of you who are in the audience this evening for coming out. Again, so many people are not aware of the Ridgeville Park District, and you have provided a lot of information and accountability for what should be, this particular service. So we thank you for that. I'd like to also thank the candidates. Thank you for your interest and desire to help make this even a better service that's available for the community, the youngsters in this community. Thank you especially to Pastor Charlotte Lehman of the Reba Fellowship. Thank you for making this particular facility available, and thank you for just being accommodating. Don't forget to vote on April 2nd. Early voting begins on Monday, the 18th. And I think it goes until the 30th, is that correct?
To the 1st.
To the 1st?
Yep.
Okay, to the 1st. That will be at the Lorraine Morton Center. And we're asking you to please vote, get your friends to vote early and often if you would like. just vote, have everybody vote. We'd also like you to ensure the fact that you, even though you've heard what's here this evening, don't sit back and not exercise your right to vote. That's right. That's a privilege that's been worked on for years. Everybody, please cast your vote. Thank you again. And if are there any specific announcements or anybody has?
People can take home extra boxes of pizza. It's here, so take it home. Otherwise, we'll give it to the clearing. Home down the street.
Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.